Hey there, gang. I'm going to try and find a couple of fun little jobs to present to you this week. Unfortunately, the one I had planned on filming is a no-go. I can't save them all, or rather, the cost of repair sometimes makes it prohibitive, and we have to pull the plug. So I'm going to see what I can do instead here. In an average week, I try to have at least one big job and several smaller ones on the go at the same time. What's a big job? Could be a refret, neck reset, broken headstock, major structural repair, that kind of thing. Something that's going to take place over several days, accounting for the glue drying time and finish curing, etc. The little ones are something that I can get done in a couple of hours while that glue is drying. So I'm not just sitting around twiddling my thumbs. It can be a bit of a round robin. I'm picking guitars up, working on them for a while, putting them down again, moving on to the next, and sort of doing it in a circular fashion. I usually liken it to playing Tetris, though. It's like fitting all the little pieces together so that a block of time is used to its greatest extent, if you know what I mean. This Strat is a parts guitar. It needs a setup, and wonder of wonders, this player actually wants me to raise the action for him. Yes, you heard right. Those people actually exist. We love them when they show up. He plays it in open G, and he's a big, strong guy who obviously really likes to dig in when he's playing. So we're also going to size up the string gauge for him as well, going from the 11s that are on it to 12s. Yeah, I know. This is a lovely guitar. The graphics here, I think, are strawberries, and they were painted by the owner's mother, who is currently dealing with illness. She's fighting cancer, so maybe we can all band together and send some healing energies her way. Yeah, it's a calligraphic touch. I like when people do this kind of thing. It reminds me of George Harrison sitting down one night and painting his blue Strat red with psychedelic patterns all over it. Or Jimmy Page looking at his Telecaster and deciding what it really needed was a hand-painted dragon. Something about injecting a very organic human component into decorating what is otherwise a very polished mass production item. It's transgressive in a way. I think it's great. Measuring the action, which I always do at the 12th fret, we're at about 6/64ths, which is somewhere between 2.3, 2.4 millimeters, which most people would consider pretty high for an electric, although there is some precedent for action heights like this. Dan Earlywine, years and years ago, he used to write a column for Guitar Player magazine. And I remember once he did a survey of the action heights on professional blues players' guitars. Stevie Ray Vaughan, for one, higher action than this. B.B. King, also higher action. So, there's a certain sound that comes from effort. A lot of your tone is in your hands and how you manipulate those strings and the kind of muscle you're using to do it. It makes a difference, even if it's just psychosomatic. But some people really do need the guitar to fight back. This has got a really nice torrefied maple neck. There are different degrees of torrefication. For those of you who don't know, torrefication involves baking the maple or other woods under pressure. It's like a magic pot for trees. Actually, that's not a great analogy. The magic pot would be like standard kiln drying because that involves more live steam. But this baking process supposedly speeds up the seasoning or the aging of the wood, makes it as if it was 50 or 60 years old. Because there are resins in the wood that crystallize over time. Usually it's a process that takes decades. You cut the tree down, you dry it out, and those resins are like the consistency of earwax. But this hardens them up and makes them glassy. And supposedly it transmits vibrations better. The heat, though, that's involved in that can make the maple brittle. As I said, there are different degrees, different colors to which they bake it. This is pretty dark. I made a guitar with something that was called toasted maple in the lumber yard wood rack a few years ago, which is pretty similar. And I noticed that during the carving process, it had a very different feel under the chisels. The difference was like taking a piece of toast out of the toaster and biting into it versus something that maybe you put in an oven for 5 or 6 hours at low heat. Something that's really desiccated. This felt really desiccated. The player is concerned about the depth of the nut slots and how a string can slip out. Just looking at these, I can see that there really is no back angle filed into those slots. And these are pretty much as low as you would want them to be. There's not much room for maneuvering there. Just the nut itself isn't very tall. And having them cut straight across, parallel to the fingerboard, not angling towards the headstock, it can be kind of a delicate thing on a Strat. Like if you get it wrong and the neck bows forward over time, the string won't be coming off at the front edge of the nut, but somewhere back within its body. So that can mess with your intonation a little bit. And the other thing is you're relying on the pinching effect of the slot to hold the string in place. And in this case there just isn't very much slot there. There's not a lot of room to slant them, but if we can make the back end of the slot a little bit deeper, they'll be less likely to jump out, and maybe we can get away with not making a new nut for them. The other thing is, this is a Hendrix style reverse headstock, obviously, and there is a string tree, but it only affects the bass strings, not the treble strings, which are more prone to coming out of the slot during strenuous playing. The other thing is you got locking tuners here, and sometimes those can hold the string higher up on the post. So you get a little less break angle there as well. So that's working against you. With the non-existent headstock angle, Fender guitars are really designed to have several wraps of the string on the post to push the takeoff point lower down on the shaft and increase that angle. The neck has a bit more relief in it than we might want. In a case like this where it'll be played with high action and big strings, there's not really any chance of it buzzing, but I want to straighten it out anyway. I'm thinking about the future, really. If you let a neck bend under all that string load, over the years it can take a forward set, or it can move in funny ways if it's not getting adequate resistance from the truss rod. What happens in 20 years from now when he decides that his hands start to hurt and he wants to try lower action? If the neck is warped, that might not be so easy to accomplish. It's one of those things that, you don't have to be anal retentive about it, but, every once in a while checking on the truss rod and making sure the neck is relatively straight is probably a good idea. He's also brought along some more trem springs here. He's currently got it set up with 3. We're going to set this up for open G for him, which is lower tension than standard, but with the rise in string gauge we might need an extra spring in there just to really keep it locked back. I don't think he wants a floating trem, he likes it solid. We'll see if we need more pull. And lastly, there are a few little sharp corners on some of the fret ends. The crowns are nicely shaped, good and polished, but just a tiny hint of fret sprout on the tangs, which happens in the middle of winter. We'll get rid of that. I'll protect the still very pristine surface of the neck with some painter's tape. I'll bring that up level to the bottom of the fret tang slots, just in case I slip with the file. To get the sharp fret tangs here, I'm using a file that is flat on one side and very gently convex or kind of triangulated on the other side. And it's tapered to a small point on the end, which lets me just focus on the metal and not hit the surrounding wood. It works really well. Just polish them up a little bit with some 2400 grit micro mesh. Just looking down here, the backside of the first fret, there's a little bit of damage there. Some chip out. I think I want to fill that. It's the kind of thing that, you leave it open and you could get a bunch of finger grease and stuff in there, and this could eventually cause the end of the fret to rise. So let's fix it now before it gets too bad. This rosewood dust is actually a pretty good match for color. Let's put a tiny little touch of accelerator down there. Make sure it cures from both sides. And I'll pack in some of the dust. This might take 2 applications. Touch of super glue. A little more dust. I'll scrape this and then I'll sand it. and I'll go back and repolish the fret. A little bit of oil. The fill turned out slightly dark, but I expect the rest of the board will quickly catch up once it gets played in. So we put on some boomers here, some 1252s. This is a delicate operation, resizing the slots and also trying to kick them back towards the headstock a little bit without cutting into the fingerboard or, going too deep. And I'll adjust the truss rod as well. In the end, I wound up with about 8/1000ths of relief. I think the saddles were still in their initial setup for a much lighter string gauge. Each string was playing very sharp, so the saddles all have to move farther away from the nut. It's playing flat, they move closer. This just requires a lot of trial and error. Also, because I'm raising the action as well, that can kick the saddles backwards a little bit and also fool with the action at the same time, so it's a dance. Hey, with the 12s on and things up to pitch here, there is just a little bit of wiggle room on the back of the trem. So if you had a heavy hand and you press it on the bridge, you could pull the string sharp, which some players do not like. They want this blocked off entirely. So we can either adjust the claw or put an extra string on. I think, this is loose enough that I would want one extra string. Yeah, I know it looks a little funny. It's going to be asymmetric, but it's playability that matters here. I suppose you could go searching for a perfectly balanced set that would let you do either 3 or 5. In this case, 5 is too much, 3 is too little, so it's going to be 4. Okay, everything's intonated now except for this low D string. It's got to come back a little bit more. And unfortunately, we've reached the end of the spring. It's fully compressed in there. There are no more turns to be had. So I've got to take this apart, take that spring out, and cut it a little bit shorter to get myself another turn and a half. And here we have a Waterloo guitar. I'm a Waterloo fan. I've worked on 3 or 4 of them now, and they've really got something going on down there. These are made in Austin, Texas, and they're based on and closely resemble those Depression-era catalog guitars from Gibson that we talked about last week. And in fact, this one is based on that Kalamazoo model that I set up. This is an Oriole, although they call this the WL14X something or other, which is not nearly as evocative, but it's an Oriole. They're very lightly built. They use the bracing specs of that period and the same plate thicknesses, and so they're physically light, but they're very loud. They sound really good. Now, I did some work on this a little while ago, and at the time there was some suspicion that I'd have to revisit it. I put in this Fishman Black Stack sound hole pickup, and that's piggybacked on a Miniflex dual interior microphone, which you can't really see very well right now. You will later on. It's just a big flexible arm that has 2 microphone heads on it, and it attaches at the tail block through the preamp to the output jack. And the player had the idea that perhaps we could make the Black Stack easily removable, so he could, number one, what he really wanted to do is figure out the difference that it made sonically to have a big sound hole pickup in there versus an open sound hole. And I think we came to the conclusion that it doesn't affect the volume all that much. You have to remember that the vibrating surface of the guitar extends to its outside. Like, a lot of the energy you hear is actually coming off the outside of a soundboard. So it doesn't really decrease the volume all that much. It could slightly change the tone, but if you're going to plug it in, I mean, you're probably willing to make that trade-off anyway. So the Black Stack is outfitted with a mini XLR jack, and there was already a wire hooked up to the stereo output on the mini flex arm that had a standard 3.5mm input jack on it, based on some other system that we had worked on in the past. And I mean, he'd found a mini XLR jack to swap that out with so that it would fit right into the Black Stack. The idea being that he could, put another chord into a different guitar and just move it around if he needed to. So I did this work, and I noticed the connection to the Black Stack was intermittent. I could rotate that little jack a bit, and it would cut in and out. This is a second-hand pickup, or it was sold to him at a discount because it was an open boxed item. So I'd get the signal from the microphone, but not the pickup. But if I held it steady, it would be just fine. And I tried taping it into the proper orientation, and it worked. It didn't change. I could rattle it around. I tested it. So I told him that this was going on, and I said, if it starts acting up again, I can swap it out and just change the connections. So the Mini XLR, it's a 4-pin variety. They have very, very, very small connecting studs. I'll show them to you. Soldering to them is probably better left to a robot, and that's why I'm going to replace it with a standard mini jack, which is much more service friendly. So I'll remove the pickup. Be careful when doing this. Don't bang up the edges of the sound hole or drop it inside where it could dent the braces or tear the label. Here's the offending XLR. And be careful when unscrewing the output jack. Now I can remove the mini mic arm. You can see it's a long assembly. It travels almost the entire length of the body. I get to cut away all that carefully done heat shrink tubing and very neat wire soldering I previously accomplished. Then I can take off the bottom of the pickup housing, which contains the male portion of the jack in a shielded cavity. Those two wires are the pickup leads, which I'll connect to the mini jack. I'll extend them through the former jack hole to give me room to work and install the plug. You can see the tiny pins. They're about 1 millimeter apart and they're straight. There's no holes or bends to hold the wire while you're soldering, so it would be a serious challenge to put those. I drilled a hole right through the previous jack to let me slip those wires through. I extended the wires, and now I can connect them to the mini jack. It's very important to remember to slide the screw-on jack cover piece before connecting the wires. You wouldn't want to leave it off because you'd look foolish. Do some delicate soldering here. Get the ground wire, the hot leads, and do that all over again on the other half. Okay, so I got it wired up, and I should probably test it before putting it back in the guitar, because there's nothing more annoying than, going through all the trouble of installing it and then finding out that something went wrong somewhere along the way. Maybe you reversed a connection or something's not working. You can see here there's the arm that's got 2 microphones. It's active, so there's a battery pack in there. And then I've got this other line to the Black Stack. This is a dual channel system, and if you're like me, the last time I worked on it I didn't have a stereo cable. This time the owner was generous enough to provide me with one for testing, but I can also use a standard mono cable by inserting only a portion into the jack so that you're contacting first one channel and then the other, either the tip or the ring on the jack. So in this case I've got it halfway in and the microphones are working, and if I push it in all the way, good strong signal from the Black Stack. So that should do. When I get it into the guitar, I've got, some ties, some cable ties and things. I'm using Velcro so that it's easily removable, and I can get this cable onto the arm in a place that, makes sense for where it should be. Alright, gang, It's currently 1:16 a.m. Probably time to stop for the day. I think I've got this one buttoned up. I'll play it. I'm not going to plug it in. I don't have an amp capable of really doing it justice. And, you know, it sounds like a really good sound hole pickup. You know what that sounds like. The nuances of the internal mic blend thing won't come through, so let's just enjoy the acoustic sound. Interestingly, this one is also tuned in Open D, which is a tuning I don't use very much, so I'm kind of finding my way around the fingerboard as I go.